having you here. We're just so you know, this meeting is being recorded. Feel free to keep your video on mute if it would make you more comfortable. We will begin in a few minutes. We have 85 RSVPs. That is amazing for the Illinois Environmental Council's first listening session. And so we hope that as we launch this, we will have as much engagement as this one. So thank you for coming out on a Thursday evening to be with us today. We also have a special guest that we will introduce in a few minutes later, but we're going to give it a little more time for people to join. Also, just a few housekeeping rules. We do expect to have lively engagement. This won't just be us talking to you. So with that, feel free to use the chat, put in any questions or comments in there, any type of responses you like. When it comes time to the discussion portion, feel free to come off mute. We'll let you know when it's time for that to happen. And you can direct your questions at any of our wonderful co-hosts here. I am joined, I'm Tanisha Harris with the Illinois Environmental Council, and I'm joined with Shreya Patel and Elliot Clay. So any of those people, you can direct any type of questions. And if you have any technical problems, feel free to send a private message to Shreya and she will help you out with that. All right. So Renee, it's nice to see you as one of our co-hosts for this event. We have several. And we're really excited to have people joining us. So like I said, we're going to give it a few more minutes. We had 85 RSVPs. People are still slowly trickling in. And we're going to give it a few more minutes to get our attendance up. But looking forward to talking with you guys today. And thank you for joining. And also, if you guys want, maybe you can drop in the chat right now which neighborhood you're from. So North Side is a pretty broad area of Chicago. We invited several districts to attend here and our co-hosting organizations, who I will give kudos to in a few minutes, also represent multiple organizations. So I'm curious to see who people are. If you want to drop your name in the chat, the neighborhood you're coming from, and maybe how you're handling the heat that's happening. It's amazing how we have so much rain going on and it is not cooling down the weather at all. Not looking forward to it. So we have Jefferson Park. Oh, welcome. Welcome. Glad you can make it. Yes, Edgewater, Ravenswood, Roskill Village, East Rogers Park. I'm from West Rogers Park myself. Yeah, let's see where everyone else is from. Mayfair, just south of LaBaugh Woods. I actually had a meeting in LaBaugh Woods. That was probably the best work meeting I've ever had. Just walking around the woods for 2 hours talking about conservation stuff. We saw blue herons, so that was great. All right, so we are going to get started with our event. My name is, first we're going to do introductions and my colleagues here will introduce themselves formally. So my name is Tanisha Harris. I am the Chicagoland Conservation Manager at the Illinois Environmental Council. The Illinois Environmental Council represents the eyes, ears, and voice of the environmental community in front of the General Assembly. And I am joined here with some of my colleagues. Shreya, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Hi, I'm Shreya Patel, she, her pronouns, and I'm an intern with the Illinois Environmental Council.
And Elliot?
Yeah, Elliot Clay. I'm the State Programs Director for Illinois Environmental Council. I'm actually one of maybe the only person here that is not broadcasting from the Chicago region. I am actually located down in Springfield, Illinois, and help the team with lots of different things, including lots of conservation policy here at the Capitol and everything. So glad to be here and talk to everybody today.
Yes, thank you for introducing yourselves, and you're going to hear from them much more later. So we want to recognize our event partners. We had several co-hosting organizations that really helped us do recruitment for this event. So we have the Edgewater Environmental Coalition. We have the executive director here, who is Renee. Thank you so much for helping drive in people for this event. We have Resilient Rogers Park. I don't know if they're on, but if you are a part of Resilient Rogers Park or the Edgewater Environmental Coalition, please let us know in the chat. The 47th Ward Green Council also helped get recruits for here. And this event is also co-sponsored by Alder Matt Martin. So we're really thankful for that. And we also had Sierra Club. Oh, we do have some 47th Ward Green Council people. We also had Sierra Club helping to drive in recruits. Like I said, we had 85 RSVPs. I still see people trickling in, and we're really glad to see that a right variety of the North Side is being covered. But we have a special guest for you. We have Senator Mike Simmons here, who is going to give us a few remarks at the top. We're really glad that he could join this event, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Senator.
Thank you so much, Tanyusha. Can everybody hear me? Cool. Yes. So it's great to be back with you again. You know, when I found out that we were all getting together this week to talk about the environment, and I knew that there would be people from the 7th District, I said, all right, this will probably be one of the better meetings I have this week because it's such an urgent issue, as you all know. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about a really obvious elephant in the room right now. You all are pretty involved and following the news and everything else. So I'm sure that you are aware that right now the state government is trying to negotiate an energy bill. And, you know, I have been pretty steadfast in saying that this needs to be a bill that, before anything else, prioritizes addressing climate change, right? It is such a no-brainer. The science is straightforward. And right now, half the West is on fire. Colorado, California, parts of Montana, Lake Michigan levels are rising because of turbulent storms that are eroding the shoreline. And it's an issue that we don't have another generation to come to terms with. And so, you know, as your state senator, and more importantly, as a fellow, you know, green activist, I've been really vocal with my colleagues in the state Senate, talking about the issue of climate change and saying we need a really aggressive timeline to decarbonize our grid and do it in a way that is equitable. So my commitment to you is that I'm continuing to fight that good fight every day. It's one of the top issues I'm thinking about right now as the state is negotiating this legislation. And obviously, I want to thank the Illinois Environmental Council for the great work that they're doing to keep the process honest. Sierra Club and other amazing organizations that we couldn't do this work without. You know, the other issue that's really important in all of this, right, is equity. You know, it's almost, you know, isn't even something I need to talk about because it's so obvious. And that's that the utilities have abused the public's trust in the state time and time again. So I have no interest in providing any bailouts to any utility companies or nuclear plants in the state of Illinois. And I've said that publicly, and a number, you know, many constituents have written and called into the 7th District office, you know, with that position. And so I just wanted to mention that. I felt like we all were getting together. That was an update I wanted to provide. But many of you and I have been talking one-off on the sidelines through emails and things like that. So I'm sure that you already are aware of the work that I've been doing on the issue. And many of my colleagues that, if I tried to name them, I'm sure I would lead off a few. But Colleen Smith has been working really closely with some of my colleagues in the state Senate around this issue. And so what I want to ask you all to do is to continue to, you know, fight the good fight and lead the advocacy that you're always doing, staying on top of the legislative process, putting in op-eds, right? Doing all that kind of work is so important, because doing that gives legislators an opportunity to really push on the issue. And I think we have to get it right this time, right? There was a big energy bill a few years ago that made some promises and didn't quite pan out. And so this time around, we got to get this issue right, and we don't have a lot more time, as you know, on climate change. And so that was all I wanted to offer. I know we're going to be talking about a number of other things during the call, but I wanted to talk about that because that is front and center for me right now, and the state Senate is looking at the energy bill. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And for those of you who it may be your first time hearing about that, he was speaking about the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which is another big issue that IEC is taking up. I actually did energy before I switched to conservation. And we're going to dabble or touch on that a little bit about how, you know, things like clean energy and nature-based climate solutions are ways that we can mitigate climate change and protect biodiversity. So, Senator Simmons, we are happy to have you for as long as you can stay. And you guys might get a chance to join a breakout room with him. Yes, there will be some breakout rooms going forward. But I just want to say for the people that are joining us just now, feel free to start putting in your name and where you're joining in from. The North Side is a very broad area. We want to know what neighborhood people are tuning in from. And going forward, please feel free to use the chat for any questions or comments. And there will be a time later on in the event for people to come off mute and just have discussions. We want to hear from the community, which is why we're having this listening session. So thank you, Senator Simmons, for really laying the tone about why advocacy is important as we work through what's going on right here in our state and on the bigger effort of combating climate change. And we are going to switch into the presentation. Be on for 10 minutes. Well, I hope you enjoy what's going to happen next. All right, so we are going to switch into this presentation. Give me 1 minute. All right. Okay, so if you're just joining us, this is a community listening session for the Chicago North Side, and it is being hosted by the Illinois Environmental Council and several other organizations, but it's part of a larger effort of the Illinois 30x30 coalition. And that coalition is composed of environmental organizations, environmental justice organizations, land and water stewards, sports, natural area recreation advocates, community organizations, all working together to figure out how to employ nature-based solutions, which we will define in a minute. So don't worry if we're using some terms that you don't know right now. We are going to make sure that everything is defined as we do the lay of the land. But those groups have come together to really unsilo conservation work and figure out how do we use nature-based solutions that we have known about for years to protect biodiversity and mitigate climate change. So the goals for this listening session is that we want to hear from you. We want all the people joining us from all over the North Side to participate. In the past, conservation efforts have not sought adequate community feedback from the public, especially from socially disadvantaged communities. This new effort to revamp conservation in Illinois will attempt to rectify the inequities of the past by engaging the community from the outset by creating a legislative package. So our end goal is to take the feedback from these community listening sessions and everything we hear from you again, and to write a bill. That's how IEC gets things done. We tackle it with policy. So we want to write a bill, and that is where you come in. So to set the stage, we're going to start off with a little bit of discussion. I'd love for people to possibly come off mute, but also use the chat and tell us, why were you interested in coming tonight? I myself am a Rogers Park resident, but I'm from South Shore, so I'm really interested to see how this discussion is going to differ across the city. Also knowing from where I came from, we have Elena saying, understand what the community is doing to combat climate change. That is a really good purpose for attending here. Would anyone else like to share?
You said to come off mute, I can share.
Yes.
So the reason that I'm here and the reason I'm excited to talk about this is because I did a lot of stuff on green urbanism in college. And I think that in looking at the climate crisis and resiliency in our local communities, we really need these nature-based solutions in our communities to deal with everything we're dealing with now and going to have to deal with more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you're definitely going to get some of that here. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Deb Winiger, and I'm here in Lincoln Square. And I just, in regards to just the environment and what's what's happening. I think everybody's painfully aware of all the forest fires and everything going on, along with record temperatures. And I just think the more everyday citizens get involved, the more we can make significant change. So that's certainly a wake-up call for me, and that's why I'm participating.
Thank you. And we're using everyday citizens to also serve as advocates to change the way things are done. Would anyone else like to share?
I would.
Go ahead.
My name is Brian Hogg. I live in Edgewater. And one of the things I'm continuously personally frustrated by is why we spend so much time and energy mowing highway sides and banks and the median along Lakeshore Drive. I mean, all of that should be put back to native plants to help with biodiversity. In the state of Texas, when Laura Bush was first lady, she followed up on Lady Bird Johnson's whole program of getting native plants, because native plants survive drought and they foster biodiversity. So this, I'm kind of making that statement for something that is specifically about state of Illinois to the senator, for him to consider getting on that push as well. Thanks.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with us. We also, thinking about the native ecosystems we have right here in Chicago, but also across Illinois, it's also vitally important to protecting biodiversity. We're going to tell you a little bit what the state of conservation is later. Please continue to come off mute and share, especially now while we have the senator here, he can hear directly from you. And I wonder if some of the people from the co-hosting organizations would like to share not only why they attended, but why their organization decided to help sponsor and organize this event.
I'd like to make a comment. My name is Mark Weber. I'm with Winsley Parkway, which is a green space in Ravenswood. And I wanted to get onto this Zoom meeting so we could learn more about how to find nature-based solutions for climate change. We'd like to modify our green space to be helpful to this cause.
Thank you. Yeah, you're in the right place. And I'm so sorry, I missed some people from the chat. I find the 30 by 30 message inspiring. I'm with the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission. Thank you for attending. And sometimes preservation in such tiny increments, you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, though it's all important. Yes, it's very much important. Thank you for joining. Randall says, I teach a course for first year college students called Discover Natural Chicago by Bicycle. I want to help the students understand the complexity of human nature interrelationships. Oh, well, this meeting is being recorded. So if you ever want to show this for your classes, you're more than welcome to do so. Maria wants to know what is actually being done and maybe how everyone can be involved. Yes. Burton says, I'm excited to take global environmental initiatives and apply them in principle and spirit at the local level. Oh, there's so much engagement going on in the chat. I am so sorry for missing it. Thank you guys so much. All right. So it looks like you guys had a separate offline conversation going. Please feel free to continue responding to that question. But we are going to transition over to the actual event. So we're going to start off with some background information so you can learn what's happening with 30 by 30, America the Beautiful, what we have planned for Illinois. And then we're going to get into the real reason why we're here. Yet again, we want to hear from the community about what you see are the most pressing issues and help maybe brainstorm solutions, because the community knows exactly what it needs the best. And we want to transition away from the traditional way of doing things in conservation and making sure that anything in a bill that we propose is something that the community can not only get behind, but also helps make improvements on quality of life and environment. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Elliot Clay. Sorry, I combined your name with Colleen.
No worries. Yeah, thank you all again for joining today. Sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background. She's going a little bit nuts in the house. But I mean, the big reason we're talking about this is, as shown in this graphic. I mean, we're losing large amounts of natural areas every year to development all over the country. We're seeing this basically everywhere. It's especially marked, in areas like Chicago region, where you're seeing urban sprawl kind of go out from the cities, and how that's really, depleting our natural areas and opportunities to do things like farming for communities and all of that kind of stuff. So that's why we wanted to talk about this. I mean, we've lost an area about the size of Indiana, as said there, to development over the last 20 years. So this is something that needs to be addressed quickly, which is why we're starting to do this. Next slide. We're gonna show this quick video really quick. That's just kind of what is 30 by 30, kind of in a nutshell.
To turn the nature crisis into a conservation legacy. Parks, people, wildlife, and climate in one bold vision. America is ready. Protect 30% of our land and water by 2030.
Yeah, that was super quick, but yeah, that's the basic gist of it. So we are working, with other states and at the national level to figure out how do we conserve or protect 30% of land and water in the United States by the year 2030. This is part of a bigger conversation that's been ongoing at the international level and was brought to the table at the United Nations a few years ago. And, echoing off of what was, being talked about earlier with all the energy legislation that's going on, there's a recognition that the climate crisis is getting worse. And we're at a tipping point, really, of where we're not going to be able to go back. And one of the things that we need to use as a toolkit for this isn't just the energy thing, though that is a very large aspect of it, but realizing that we can be utilizing the efforts of nature right now to be able to, sequester carbon out of the air, and do a lot of other really cool things, including, improving the health of our communities. And there's a myriad of different benefits that we're going to be talking to you about today. Next slide. Yeah, and this is just kind of a brief overview. President Biden has done a lot in his tenure in office so far to invest in climate solutions, and we're seeing this through the infrastructure package that's being put together in Washington right now, and the further reconciliation package that'll be coming later this year. Illinois stands ready, and we need to be ready to work with the federal government and surrounding states, all the way down to the local communities that we're all, a part of, to figure out how we're going to implement this plan and move forward. Next slide. And this is kind of a brief overview of a lot of different things that can be covered in this. So there's big obvious stuff, right? State parks, our oceans, the marine protected areas, wildlife refuges. But in Illinois, there's a couple really big ones, right? Working lands, for example, farms cover the state. And it's something that's going to be at the forefront of our thought when we think about how do we do things that are going to be improving the environment while also keep supporting our state's, largest economy. And then for everybody in particular here tonight, the Chicago region, urban open space, and how we can better integrate green space into our communities and heavily populated areas, and also try to address some of the inequities in environmental planning that have happened in the past that have disproportionately impacted our most underserved communities throughout the country. So this is where you all are going to come in. So we're really excited to keep talking about this. Tanisha, next slide. And just as my final thing, just the general state of conservation in Illinois. Illinois is a very large state. I kind of get baffled every time I look at land stats that Illinois is very big. But right now, only 4% of the entire land mass in Illinois is quote unquote protected through a variety of means, whether that's state parks or conservation easements, land trusts, and a lot of other things. 75% of the total land mass of Illinois is in agriculture. Again, why that's going to be such an important part of how we move forward with planning some of these things. We also, we have all this corn and soy, but we only grow 4% of the food we eat. That means that 96% is coming into Illinois, which is increasing emissions from transportation. And it's causing a food system that is not great. And it's not equitable for people, the environment, and a myriad of other different things. And right now we rank 44th in public land ownership. Illinois used to be a leader in conservation during the 80s and 90s, and we have sharply dropped off of that. And we're trying to get back to, being a leader for the rest of the country.
So I really want to hop on the fact that we only grow 4% of the food we consume. So Illinois is primarily an agricultural state. So 75% of all of our land is used for agriculture. But did you know that, or I'm just curious, and you guys can answer this in the crowd, do you know what our two main crops are in Illinois? First one to answer gets bragging points.
Corn and soy.
Yes, Bert and whomever just came off mute. It's corn and soy. Did you know that we cannot consume that? It is not grown for human consumption. It's made for other things like ethanol, animal feed, and plastics. So not only we have some of the most fertile soil in the nation, we have 75% of our land is used for agriculture, and we can't even eat what we grow. But that's just also, and our other uses are being put in the chat. Thank you guys, you're extremely intelligent. But also just to lay more of a foundation of like why we need to do something to combat climate change, we need to think about how it's impacting Illinois. So due to the lack of protected lands and the ever exacerbating climate change, we've all experienced the impacts, whether that's flooding, and I know you guys in Chicago know about that. We had a horrendous storm last night. I can't imagine someone made it way unscathed. Agriculture disasters declared in all 102 counties. Shoreline erosion, we have the lake nearby. Senator Simmons, I imagine that's something that you're very concerned about, like lakeshore erosion, and we have a disruption of our food systems. So this is how climate change is impacting the state, and that's also the way the state is. And as Elliot was saying, like, as 30 by 30, just conserving, which is protecting 30% of land and water by 2030. So within the next 9 or so years, the Midwest and Illinois really isn't seen as an area of interest for that. And we need to change that because Illinois has a myriad of ways we can achieve this, and we also have a very unique, we have unique ecosystems from woodlands to prairies, but we also have unique ecosystems when it comes to communities and people. We have rural, suburban, and urban areas like the city of Chicago. So the way 30 by 30 is being thought of at a federal level, we have to figure out how can we fine tune that to fit Illinois right now. And that's where the coalition comes in, but that's also where you guys come in. So we're going to get into more of the listening part of this. And these are the themes we're going to cover: outdoor access, clean water, jobs, local food, sustainable agriculture, and what the public process looks like for this. And again, I'd love to see that people are using the chat. I'm going to ask that you might have received an email before this to complete a survey. So we're going to put that survey in the chat for everyone to pull up. But if you have it readily available, please feel free to pull that up because we are going to start completing that survey together. And then after that survey is completed, we are going to get into breakout rooms to discuss it, because what good is having responses if we can't understand the reasoning behind them? So let's talk about, we talked a little bit about the state as a whole and where that conservation is at, but let's talk about urban open space because we are in an urban area. We are the city of Chicago, which is, unique and different from the rest of the state and how we would go about achieving 30 by 30. So thinking about how much open space that we have here, the Chicago Park District owns nearly 9,000 acres of green space. But in terms of the state of the quality of the park and how well it's used, it's not very equitable across the state. We are losing our tree canopy due to disease and just them being cutting down and improper maintenance. So it went from 19 to 16% since 2010. We did have one win on that though, the Urban Forestry Advisory Board, which is a board that is going to work with the city council to navigate those tree canopy issues, but other issues that comes up with the forestry around trees, passed unanimously out of the city council a few months ago. So we are making some headway on that. And then while hundreds of community gardens call Chicago home, and that ranges from gardens that produce vegetables and edible produce to ornamental gardens like native gardens or ones you would just enjoy and recreate in, there is a problem with reforming vacant lots into urban agriculture. There is a lot of systems that push people out of this, whether it's getting access to a hydrant to water your plants, to even getting the areas zoned for commercial use so you can have, say, a farmer's market on that lot. There is a lot of problems here. And while we have a lot of potential in Chicago, we have a lot of barriers too. So the Illinois 30 by 30 Coalition has a goal that every Illinois citizen should have access to green space, and that access should not be hindered by distance or feelings of unsafety. So while you may have access to open space, you may not feel as welcome and included in said open space as well. So Illinois is a wonderful selection of parks and natural areas and other outdoor opportunities for citizens to enjoy. These locations are not equally distributed throughout the state. Every Illinois citizen should have access to them. Only 55% of Americans live within a 10-minute walk from a park, which leaves nearly half the population to live in a nature-deprived community. And 42% of Americans feel either only somewhat safe or even worse in getting to their green space. But Illinois currently has 309 state parks. I don't know how many of you knew that. And they're all managed by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. We also have land trusts that are acquiring land, protecting it, and making sure that while we're doing a protect, restore, and transfer model, there are budgetary constraints across levels of government. So that brings us to our first question. You don't have to wait for us to get to the question, but the background information might be helpful. Currently, 4% of Illinois land area is protected. Do you believe this is enough? And, feel free to explain the reasoning for your answer in the chat as well. Personally, I don't think it's enough, but you can say I'm biased because my title is the Chicagoland Conservation Manager. But I'm thinking of how do I envision what an increase in protected land would look like? And, maybe you're thinking about that too as you're going through the survey. Yeah, we're getting a few, not enough. And, feel free to say yes. 75% of this is agriculture. We are a state that likes to grow things. So yes, location, location, location. Okay, we're going to keep going. And then we think about the social inequity to outdoor access. So Black, Indigenous, people of color, and low-income communities are frequently deprived of nature. These populations have been redlined into areas which will see some of the worst immediate effects of climate change. We can think about that being extreme flooding on the east side of Chicago. And we can also think about that being the urban heat effect, which is due to the decrease in tree canopy, which is often on the south and west sides of Chicago. You're seeing extreme heat because there isn't a buffer there like we have on the north side. I love to take pictures of rain gardens over here. They are beautiful, which is another way to slow flooding and when we have heavy rain events. And then studies have shown that childhood exposure to green space reduces the risk of developing psychiatric disorders. It's also less areas for pollution exposure. So there is a benefit to having a green space and access to it. So what are your barriers? What are the barriers to accessing nature for you? And feel free to select all that apply. When I lived on the south side, it was more so like just getting to said natural area was arduous. It was time and then it was a lot of money. So that's just a little personal tidbit. I live in Rogers Park now, so I'm surrounded by green space, and transportation still remains a little bit of a problem, but I definitely enjoyed a little more than I did growing up. Yeah, distance and walkability. I love being able to walk places. Also, just a quick reminder, this event actually goes until 7:30. I apologize for if you got an invite that says differently, but we will move through the questions together a little bit quicker so we can hear from the community, but this does go until 7:30. Okay, and then what do you like to do in nature? How do you recreate? Select all that apply. And then also on the Google form, there is an other option. So if there's something on here that isn't listed, feel free to type it in. The city and railroad do not take advantage of the potential green spaces along railroads in the city. Yes, we also can expand a clean energy electrified fleets to get over there. Swimming, walking with my dog. I love to do that too. Do you know you have to teach huskies how to swim? It's a nice quick fun fact. Okay, jobs. We cannot talk about Illinois 30 by 30 without talking about the jobs that it's going to bring to Illinois. So while IDNR supports 90,000 jobs, so that just means that rather directly or indirectly, whether you're thinking about recreation, like birding or hunting, licensings and permits, these some way go through the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and it directly employs about 1,200. We have 6.5 billion deferred maintenance that we need funding to do. We want to make sure that the protected lands that we enjoy, the natural areas that we enjoy have the proper maintenance they need to continue on. And we also want to make sure these jobs get into people that need them the most and have been left out or excluded, which surprisingly only Black, Indigenous, people of color make up 29% of the conservation and science workforce. So that is a deeply inflated number because it's not just conservation jobs, but it's any type of job that would fall underneath the science umbrella. And did you know Chicago has one of the highest employment levels of conservation scientists? We can make that number even higher. So we have opportunities to expand jobs in the conservation sector immediately, but they are underfilled. So let's get into maybe why that is. So which of these do you think is important to consider when hiring people to work at farms and conservation areas in your community? Please rank them from 1 to 6. And I would love to hear what people's top choice is in the chat. Also, it looks like Senator Simmons has dropped off, but he has left his contact information in the chat. So that is great. And just for anyone that doesn't know what living wage is, it is a wage that keeps up with the cost of living. All right. Living wage, we got that as someone's first pick. Anyone else want to share? All right, is it true that Chicago has the least is it true that Chicago has the least amount of urban green space of any similar city, but Chicago also has the most parkland ringing in the city? We will check on that offline and get back to you. Yeah, that is a great question. All right, what are barriers to your community applying for conservation and or farming jobs? And we know this may not be that relevant to the north side with farming jobs, but there is also a plethora of conservation jobs, as I stated, in the city. So like, what is a barrier that you think people have to apply? And again, feel free to put your top pick in the chat. Okay, we're going to continue. So, local food. Every Illinois resident has access to healthy, environmentally sustainable, and ethically sourced food, including but not limited to the right to grow their own food. This is a local food goal that the coalition has. And we know this is extremely pertinent to what's happening in Chicago as you think about urban agriculture. Industrialized food production and distribution has increased carbon emissions from transportation and led to a system which is almost wholly dependent on a handful of corporations. The crisis within the meat industry in the early days of the pandemic showed how unsustainable our current model is and exposed the industry's often lack of consideration for employees, which this same system has also led to the virtual collapse of rural Illinois due to the massive decrease in jobs and loss of local businesses, which were the cornerstones of small town America. We also know that, again, there are people that want to do urban agriculture right here in the city that are being pushed out from it. So we want to hear from you. Do you make choices to seek out food that is grown in ways that prevent pollution? That's a great question. So it's arduous to turn vacant lots into vegetable gardens because there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape that individuals have to jump through that has to do with whether if what the lot is zoned at. So like, let's say you can turn the lot, like one, you may not be able to buy the lot from the city for use of urban agriculture. Or let's say you do purchase a lot from the city, but because it's not zoned commercially, you can't actually sell your produce on the lot. Or let's say you manage to get raised garden beds, but you aren't allowed to hook up to a fire hydrant to water it. And we've actually had stories of people running community gardens saying that they're borrowing hoses from their neighbors and trying to drag it as close to their beds as they can to water it. So it's things like that that make it difficult to turn a vacant lot to a vegetable garden. And we're trying to figure out how. Go ahead, Ellie.
No, I'll add one thing too. From an environmental standpoint, one reason that some of these places can't be developed on because they are historically in industrial areas, and in Chicago, that is definitely a huge problem. There are heightened levels of chemicals like arsenic and things. I mean, from manufacturing that goes back over 100 years. We've seen the same thing down here in East St. Louis. I mean, there are large portions of vacant areas in that area of the state that are Superfund sites. And we need to figure out, is remediation something that needs to be considered? How much dirt do you need to put on top of something to make it safe to grow vegetables that you're going to be consuming? It's all those kind of things. So yeah. Thanks for letting me jump in.
Of course, thanks for adding that. And then even like if you do dump a bunch of dirt over it, it's also possible you might have to throw out your first harvest because, you know, plants are actually a way to remediate polluted soil, but it's also whatever polluted particulate matter or lead. There's a big issue in Chicago that's now in the plan. You have to store that somewhere too. So there's a huge cost of starting turning a vacant lot into a farm that, you know, the bureaucracy and red tape makes even more difficult. And some of you guys have already started answering this question, but how much more would you pay to purchase food that you know is grown in a way that protects soil and water and prevents pollution? I also want to know, like, some people said they describe to CSAs, you know, you might have also attended a farmer's market and how they have a program or agreement with SNAP or EBT, which is the food stamps program. And that's basically where you get double the amount you have in EBT. So you can use at a farmer's market, and that's helping to increase accessibility to fresh local produce. But when you live in a food desert, it may not be possible to do that. So on a scale from 1 to 10, how easy is it for you to find local food produced in your community? With 1 being extremely easy to 10 being very difficult. And just to share another story, I grew up in South Shore, so we would walk almost 2 miles or like an hour to get to a grocery store. So I would rank this 10, but now that I am in Rogers Park, I am surrounded by grocery stores and farmers markets. So that is an easy one for me. And I think that should be the status quo across the city. 7 or 8, 9, we got some high numbers in here, all right. How close is your access to fresh produce in your community using the mode of transportation that you use most frequently? So let's say, do you drive to your grocery store? How long does that take? Do you walk to your grocery store? Do you take public transportation? Do you bike? Whichever one you use the most frequently to get your produce. Tell us, how long does it take and what is that mode of transportation? Yes, I also have less than a 10-minute walk. Delivery service is very expensive. I do that too. All right, 15 minutes. So based on the way people are responding, it's less than 30 minutes or between the 0 and 30 minutes. A lot of walking. I do enjoy walking to my grocery store as well. All right, and then the public process. So we have a goal that every resident and every community is engaged in the land use decisions that are being made for their community. And engaged means that not just a public comment period, but the barriers that are preventing engagement are broken down so it can be robust. And you are also you are a decision maker in this. Not only can communities feel left out when it comes to decisions that are made, which impacts them, these issues can be misrepresented to them and seem advantageous to the communities when in reality, they pose significant environmental concerns. People can feel as their voices are not being heard, which is why it's important resources are provided to communities to be able to navigate the process and advocate for their best interests. So that, if you've been following some of the General Irons issue, where moving from Lincoln Park to the southeast side, that's an example of a land use decision being made without the community being involved. There's also in Illinois, a Pembroke pipeline that was approved by the legislature despite opposition from the local Black farming community. So these are examples of communities being left out of the decisions, and that can lead to dangerous and hazardous consequences. More than half of buildings in the United States are in disaster-prone areas because the process to develop in those areas, the community was not consulted. So we want to know, what is the public participation process like for you? What prevents you from more actively participating in land use decisions, if any, in your community? And feel free to share whether there are any barriers or not. Little knowledge of opportunities to participate. Yeah, it's not, agencies can be a little lackluster in sharing these opportunities to engage. Both believe that your voice won't be heard and you're still doing it all. You have to try. Yeah, little trust in these processes. Few opportunities to create new and public spaces because everything is full. I think there might be another option on the farm, so feel free to type that in, Richard. Meetings with local politicians tend to be overlong. Everyone's an expert. Well, I hope your meeting with our senator was a little bit different. Okay, thank you guys for sharing in the chat. I can't wait to hear from you verbally. Okay, clean water. So we can't talk about nature-based solutions and protecting land without talking about clean water. We have an abundance of water resources. There are over 119,000 miles of streams within our borders, 900 miles of large rivers form our western, eastern, and southern borders. And there are more than 91,000 freshwater lakes and ponds in Illinois. And of course, we have Lake Michigan, which I only live about 15 minutes away from. Unfortunately, Illinois continues to be one of the top water polluters of Mississippi River states, contributing millions of pounds of nutrient runoff into the Gulf of Mexico and negative impacting drinking water for citizens in rural parts of the state. Right in Chicago, we have the most lead service lines out of any city, I believe. And it's a really big deal. And while we did pass, IC worked on wonderful legislation to get those pipes removed. Not only is it expensive, it's a very long process, and people are being affected by lead leaching or lead in drinking water right now. So let's talk about that. How often is your life impacted by flooding? And I apologize, this is a little heavy on our minds for that heavy rainfall that just happened. Number gets bigger every year. Yeah, and if you don't know, maybe just take your best guess. Or maybe if you know how often your neighbors are. Oh, I'm sorry, your basement floods that many times. That has to be difficult. Yeah, there's streets getting flooded. I know the Loyola University Chicago Library, part of the basement part of it gets flooded a lot. It's also right on the lake. And do you trust the water from your tap? That's a big question. Do you drink water directly out of the tap? And also maybe, do you drink water out the tap? Yeah, I also have a filter. I think in a pinch I would trust it, but we have a filter. Yes, same here. All right, so with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen. And we are going to get into breakout rooms. So there will be 3 breakout rooms moderated by Shreya, Elliot, and myself. I hope that you will engage in them just as well. And we're going to do a little bit deeper dive into some of your survey responses. So I'm just going to create 3 and they're opened up. So just make sure you hit join breakout room. You had some good time. I hope you guys enjoyed your small group discussions. As we finish up this event, we're going to do a big group discussion about some things that came out from your conversations. I'm also going to start cherry picking some questions to talk about because I can see all the responses in front of me and I'm actually very surprised by a few of them. So would anyone like to just share what stood out to them, and maybe we can start off from there. If not, I'll give us a question to jump off from. And Shreya and Elliot, feel free to share like something that had a lot of discussion from your groups as well.
I'll just say we definitely just talked about a menagerie of different things, which was really, really cool. Being from downstate Illinois, I probably heavily influenced the conversation on agricultural issues, but we talked a lot about, I talked about the right to garden bill that we passed this last year, and that, being a good example of how we can change policies that allow people to not only benefit themselves, but get better use out of their own properties, right? I was talking about the fact that you look at the water use in the United States, and there is a huge percentage of it that is used just to water people's lawns, which I said, the only benefit of that is making me sweat when I go mow it, which I need the exercise anyways, but that's another point. But, there's a lot of other beneficial uses we can do, so.
Yeah, Elliot, my group actually got into the public process and land use decisions and basically how people feel inferior and disenfranchised when it comes to helping to make these decisions. Can you talk about the right to garden bill, the native gardens registry, and some policy solutions that have came from a public input process that IEC is working on?
Yeah, sure. I talked about this with my group, so sorry to be a dead horse for the folks that just heard the story, but one of the cool bills that we just passed this year was the Illinois Right to Garden Act. We've been working on this for the last 3 years. This was brought to us, the idea for it, by a woman that's living in Elmhurst named Nicole Virgil. She was trying to have a hoop house in her backyard so she could grow her own fruits and vegetables for her family during the winter. And she had done that for a couple of years, but then the city came in and said that they were considering it to be a permanent structure, that they didn't like the look of it. They didn't think it met aesthetic standards. At the same time, she had people living on the block from her that had gazebos that were around the same size that were serving no purpose other than to, make their owners, happy and host cocktail parties and stuff. So we wanted to write a bill that said, municipalities cannot enact regulations or enforce things that have, the specific purpose of regulating somebody's right to grow food on their own property. This was a bill that, made people giggle when they read the name, the Right to Garden bill, like how does people not have the right to do that? This bill took 3 years to get passed. It had a astounding amount of opposition. The Illinois Municipal League, for example, is like one of the largest lobbying bodies in the state. Were adamantly opposed to this passing. And it influenced legislators to not want to support this. But I will say, kind of the silver lining of the COVID pandemic is that people got really into gardening and interested into where their food was coming from. And I think in the end, that may have actually given us the push we needed this last year to get a lot of senators and representatives to come to the light and see that this isn't about protecting a municipality's right to enforce codes. This is about protecting citizens' rights to be able to provide for their own families. We see this kind of thing with legislation a lot. I know, Tony, you had mentioned like the native garden registry. That's one I don't have a lot of super experience with, other than just to say that, going back to what I was saying earlier, that there's better uses for the land that we've got right now, to help increase pollinator populations, to provide food for ourselves and our communities, and even habitat for wildlife, especially for folks living downstate. There's opportunities here that we've got, and we need to make sure that the policies are in place to allow people to do these things to benefit all of us ultimately.
Hey, Tanisha, could I throw something in?
Yes.
You might know this, but I mean, for anybody who doesn't, the lawns were created as a status symbol, and it was an English creation where it was all about, look how wealthy I am. I don't have to grow crops on my front lawn to feed pigs and chickens in my backyard. And now look how people just do it unconsciously, like Kentucky bluegrass is wiped out, so much biological diversity and sources for pollinators and, the whole thing. So yeah, good job, bro.
That's great. I would love to actually read more about the history of lawns. That as more we've gotten into this policy and stuff, those are the kind of things that I'm just like, wow, like there's an actual history behind this, like why we're doing these things.
Yeah.
So as we are winding down, I would love to get a little bit more into the public process question. That's kind of where my group ended off at, but I just want to hear more about what are some barriers to you engaging in land use decisions in your community. We heard that people don't feel empowered. They don't feel like they have a voice. They're even aware of opportunities to engage. And if they do, the powers that be don't take it seriously. So I was wondering if any other groups got to that question. And if so, how did you respond on the forum? And what ways do you think we could break those barriers down?
I think there's a lot of red tape on this natural area steward with the park district. And I would love to extend the natural area and do more native plants, but there's not real clarity on how to actually make that happen. And the natural use program doesn't have a lot of resources. So there's not a lot of clarity on that. But like as a local organization, I've actually been meaning to tell IEC that we're doing this. So this is a great opportunity. We're doing this Parkway for Pollinators program where we're trying to turn parkways into native habitats. And like technically it's not allowed because of like the native plant ordinance thing, which is why we support the native plants ordinance. But, you know, we're building all these corner gardens and parkway gardens that are all native plants that, so we're just like, you know, I've been wanting to tell you all that we were doing that. So we're doing that. When the registry is a thing, we will register them. But in the meantime, we're doing it anyways.
You heard it here first, folks. So there's a lot of red tape to get around. How do people who don't own property, how they can be involved? Yeah, there's a lot of renters. I myself am one. How do you get involved in a process that seems like it can be primarily focused towards private landowners? It's a great question. Any other final comments or questions or responses to anything you've heard today? Okay, well, thank you guys so much for attending our first listening session. We're really happy to have had you here. I just want to say some of the next steps. We are going to compile the data from all our listening sessions. So if you didn't complete the survey, please do so at your leisure. Shreya put the link to it again in the chat. If you've already completed it, thank you so much. And we are going to compile that data and write a bill so your voices can be heard and we can make some changes at the state, local, or even municipal level to figure out how Illinois can align with America the Beautiful and 30 by 30 so we can protect our ecosystem, see an increase of land, create some jobs in the process, get people more involved in their own public process, and mitigate the impacts of climate change, which we are seeing right here in our state. I'm going to drop my email in the chat in case you have any questions or would like to learn how you can get involved more so. Feel free to follow IEC on any of our social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so you can just look up the Illinois Environmental Council. You can also become a member, sign up for our newsletter or action alerts to keep up on what's going on. So thank you so much, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. We appreciate you being the first in our series of community listening sessions, and we're going to write a great bill.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tanisha.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.